Liftoff. Great. Dobar dan, dali vas interesira umietna inteligencia. So from here on out, we will be going in English. That's all I've got for you. And I'm looking forward to a contest where we speak artificial intelligence in as many languages as possible because I know that phrase in many languages now. But anyway, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming. I'm really looking forward to talking you through a little bit around artificial intelligence and humanizing the customer experience. But before I go into that, I really wanted to focus a little bit on what actually is artificial intelligence, is the question I get asked. And for me, having lived in the marketing and advertising world and then seeing the disconnect between the people that build, the engineers, and the marketeers, as I like to put it, there's a real disconnect between those that understand and those that implement. So for me, artificial intelligence is really that idea of humanizing. The more technical things become, actually, we need humans even more than ever. So that'll be the premise of the next sort of 40 minutes or so. And what I want to say is, the other thing I usually get with artificial intelligence is everyone saying, oh, it's very beyond my understanding. And coming from an area where I knew nothing about AI to now speaking to you about it and doing a degree in machine learning, I will say that this is a safe space and it's a small room today, so ask as many questions as possible. Please make this time yours and yeah, ask questions as we go. That's completely fine. So first, a little survey. How many people in the room know what the kind of terms are around machine learning? Does anyone know what machine learning is? Great. Does anyone know what deep learning is? Does anyone know the difference between them? Okay, Jim, you've already spoken, so you won't be taking the presentation today. But everyone else, there's a few people in the back who do as well, so we're in great company. But I think, you know, even doing that little survey just now is very indicative of the current state of AI understanding that's so varied in terms of the knowledge levels, and that's what makes it so interesting, but also so challenging as a field. And demystifying AI is kind of my way of just debunking and the jargon that is used. There's a lot of terminology that's used very interchangeably when it comes to artificial intelligence. So I just will be using a few of these phrases as we go throughout the presentation. The first, obviously, is what is AI, and you know, if you read a textbook, it's a collection of statistical models and algorithms. But to put it in plain English, it really is about the idea of simulating cognitive behavior and intelligence within machines. And within artificial intelligence, there is a subset, which is known as machine learning and deep learning. And this is really where we start to look at getting that more robust engineering that we see in a lot of the big platforms like Google and Facebook, who are very focused on deep learning and machine learning. And what I want to say is the difference between the two is purely just based on how the data is presented. Artificial intelligence is built on just mass data sets. So the differences between machine learning and deep learning, for example, is that machine learning is built on decision trees and what also is known in the field as regression algorithms. I won't bore you on that. That's for you to Google later. And deep learning is built on that essentially moving towards neural networks, which are known to simulate basically the challenge is to achieve what is known as like the neurons between our brains and how that similarity works in neural networks. And as the name suggests, and the best way I like to think as well of neural networks is just as a cake, if anyone likes food. So the deeper a neural network is, hence the name deep learning, the stronger the system is overall. So to put that into context for you, you know, a maybe smaller deep learning neural network will be comprised of about, if we think about the cake, 50 layers. And Google and Facebook and all of those larger global organizations operate at about 150 plus layers in their cake or their network. So that's just a little bit about those two. But the reality is, as well, artificial intelligence, it's so varied in terms of a lot of people think we're on the bleeding edge, and there's a lot of different sections within AI around like general intelligence, super intelligence, but AI is really all around us already. And that's proof in terms of how it already is ingrained within our daily lives. If we think about how we navigate to the shops via Google Maps, that's artificial intelligence. How we look at films or TV shows on Netflix through a recommendation engine, which is powered by machine learning, and also maybe Spotify, if you listen to your playlists or create playlists, that's the recommended songs that you see are also through that technique of machine learning as well. And then if anyone's ever used things like filters, Snapchat, that is based on the more deeper learning because of the visual recognition aspect, which we'll come on to a little bit later. But really, there's also some interesting kind of impacts and the multiplier effect that AI that we're set to see, mainly in terms of its impact on the economy, which is set to reach 15.7 trillion by 2030. If I'm being honest, I really do not like these slides that give you a massive figure. Who's going to check in 2030? I'm not. We don't really know. What it does tell us, though, is the sheer scale and impact that it is set to be added by artificial intelligence. So I would say when you see presentations like this, take the number with a pinch of salt because they do vary between presenters and sources, but the overarching theme is that it will be huge. And another question when we look at, artificial intelligence, the future of AI is, will AI take over the world and kill us all, or will AI steal my jobs? These are the most frequently asked questions that we see. And the answer to will AI take over and, steal our jobs from us can be answered in 3 words: the automation paradox. And this is basically the theory that's also run across other emerging technologies, not just artificial intelligence. There's also a really interesting paper called The Ironies of Automation, which is basically the precursor to the automation paradox. But what we mean by the automation paradox is that ability to know that the more things become automated, and like what I was saying at the beginning with artificial intelligence, the more automation we have, the more we need humans to be complementary to that automation. And it is not a case of, one or the other replacing, but actually the symbiosis between humans and technology. And we see this has already played out. It's not new by any means. The automation paradox has already come into effect if we think about the legal system. So if anyone in this room is a lawyer, I'm sure you can probably talk to this more eloquently than I will. But in short, the legal system went through automation in terms of when you look through a case, and there's a phase in that process called the discovery phase in terms of researching as much information about the case as possible to build your argument. That process was usually done by paralegals and junior assistants within firms, was actually automated really by artificial intelligence. And that allowed so much more productivity within legal firms for teams to focus on the more downstream part of the cases, as opposed to right in the beginning where research could take a massive amount of time up, which was not always afforded to people when cases had to be turned around really quickly. So we've already seen that automation paradox work. Another element of that is also when it comes to finance. When we saw the introduction of ATM machines, everybody thought that bank tellers would no longer exist and banks locations would close down completely. That was not the case. It actually allowed for more bank branches to be opened and kind of democratize that network that we now see in terms of different branches for different banks. And the journey of artificial intelligence goes right the way back beyond, 2000. It goes back actually as far as 1950 when the term AI was first coined. But in terms of its impact on the customer experience, we've definitely seen an evolution in the ways that AI has been implemented, adopted, thanks to the decrease in the cost of hardware, the increase in computing power, and the ubiquity of, smart devices and connectivity like 5G and 6G for telecoms. But really, it started out in 1988, which, if anyone knows already what's happening, I will tell you it's that Amazon introduced collaborative filtering. So that was a really big breakthrough. Amazon, obviously, as some of you might know, started out selling books. But collaborative filtering was really their way of personalizing for the first time, not just collaborative filtering between customers, so the relationship that consumers have with similar customers of the same profile. They actually launched item-level filtering, which was known as like the product filtering that we know when you see on your website recommended products for you. That's basically built on not just not just how customers are buying, but also what products they're buying, the relationship between different product levels and different types of product characteristics, as opposed to the different types of consumers. So that is a subtle difference between those types of filtering that was introduced by Amazon and changed the way that products were surfaced to customers. Fast forward 2011, voice recognition comes onto the scene with much more adoption on a mass scale because Siri was embedded within the iPhone 4. That was a novel step in terms of voice recognition adoption on a much broader scale than it was previously, and also at a much more entry-level position for customers to become more familiar with that technology. But it didn't quite work as well as it should have at first, hence that kind of AI was definitely preceded by technologies that didn't quite fit the standard when at first, but that is the point of machine learning and deep learning, is that it grows more strong over time and more robust. And then we have AI optimizing kind of the decision making, personalization, and advertising, where we had more targeted ads. Google Ads really improved its system. And then in 2015-16 launched RankBrain, which understands user intent. And that was a really novel launch for them because it meant that searches were no longer just based on the text, but actually the intentions of customers at a behavioral level. And that was embedded within their algorithm called RankBrain that then powered the Google search, all of the blue links that you see on the first pages and beyond, and also the advertising. So it was embedded at a wider level across the organization, which is another good point about artificial intelligence. Systems and programs that are built for one use case can also be translated into different areas because of the nature of how they work. And that's what we see in a lot of great use cases as well that I'll take you through as we go. And now we're coming on to a part where AI is elevating the customer experience. And that's really because by 2025, it's set to power 95% of customer interactions, which is, you know, a huge amount of our experiences and our relationships with brands and also their relationships with customers that will be enabled by AI. And this is a really exciting place to be in, but also challenging as well, because it means that the stakes are much higher, essentially. AI is no longer going to be nice to have, it's going to be a need to have. So understanding how to deliver the best value through artificial intelligence is really going to be the focus for a lot of businesses. But in terms of where the focuses already lie, businesses are prioritizing problem solving and efficiency. So in terms of, we can see here on the left, we have efficient interactions. Healthcare, unsurprisingly, with insurance, is actually coming out on top. Personalization as well is a big focus, but more interestingly, empathy is the least prioritized, especially by travel. And it's quite telling that travel is coming behind insurance. Not really sure what that's about, but it should probably be the other way. And really, this shows us that, you know, there's still a long way to go when we think about the perfect, you know, customer experience, what that looks like. It is a much more empathetic experience through AI, because that is where, you know, the future of more humanized and humanized experiences will be coming through, because at the minute, efficiency and personalization is a good first step, but it still means that we're leading more with the technology and machines over actually serving the customer at their exact needs and emotional states, which in advertising is incredibly important. And because obviously we are within the yacht industry, this is my take on trying to meet you guys halfway for your industry. I'm not an expert in this field, but what I am an expert in is touch points and the different touch points that exist within the yachting industry. These are non-exhaustive by any means, and they will continuously be evolving as I'm speaking to you today. But what it does show is that there is 26 core touch points that span, unsurprisingly to everyone in this room, I'm sure, online and offline as well. And that can be anything. I won't go through them all for time's sake. It can be anything from being targeted by Google Ads, customers researching from their mobile devices through search. And what this really shows as well is that because, like I said earlier, artificial intelligence exists on data, this is a really great opportunity for artificial intelligence to really close the gap between what we call the initial discovery of a product, in a yacht, in this case, a yacht charter or holiday, and also the final destination, so transaction, booking. So shrinking that process and making it as seamless as possible is where artificial intelligence is really poised to elevate the customer experience, but also add value to the customer experience as well. And this is also really relevant in the yacht industry at present because of how digitized it's becoming. I wouldn't say it's been moving at as fast a pace as other industries, but by no means is it not impacted by automation. And we're seeing this with smart yachts already in terms of how digitization is happening within yacht building, infrastructure, electronic and e-yachts, that kind of sustainability focus, and also within kind of not just for customers, but for the crews as well, who have to navigate through yachts. Sorry, is that a question? Oh, no. Um, oh, okay, great. Nods are welcome also. Great, thank you. That's amazing. Come sit at the front. Perfect. If you have any questions as I'm going, please feel free to ask. And businesses are really moving beyond just transactions to interactions. And what I mean by this is not to say that they're no longer prioritizing selling, because nobody is in the charity business, and even charity businesses need to make some source of revenue. But what it does say is, what this does mean is that, especially given the last 18 months because of the pandemic, is that line between selling to the customer versus serving them is becoming massively blurred in terms of how brands and businesses can really meet that customer to generate more ROI, return on interaction. So there's three core ways this is happening through AI enablement, and that is image recognition, text recognition, and voice recognition as well. And these are all really core areas of artificial intelligence, which were powered by those kind of terms that we discussed earlier. So to dive into it, text recognition, or interpretation rather, is impacting the customer experience through three ways. So first being contingency management, the ability to position businesses on the front foot and be able to be predictive as opposed to reactive of what's happening is incredibly important in the travel industry. So knowing when there might be a delay, when there might be a cancellation due to a malfunction in equipment, of a yacht or an aeroplane is incredibly crucial, and making sure the customer is not just engaged but also informed actively throughout is the key to kind of minimizing frustration throughout the customer experience. Relevance at scale, obviously, is definitely key as well when we start to think about like personalization and how that works to a wide portion of your customers. And then the third one is that conversational commerce, which I'll come on to through a use case. But I wanted to call out Qantas Airlines. It was one of the first airlines to really embed AI within its operations, and they did that throughout not just their booking systems, but also for their customer service agents as well. So it worked internally as well as from a customer-facing angle, and they were really able to do that by helping to pull in multiple different data sources across their organization. So things like helping people book their flights, all the way through to understanding, like I said earlier, when there might be a disruption because a plane's coming in late from Frankfurt, so they can't get to Australia on time, and being able to warn people before they get to the airport. This now is nothing as new. It's still not embedded within every airline, I would say, but they were one of the first movers to do it, which was the difference in kind of setting the standard for what efficient interactions look like. And conversational commerce, not sure why this did not happen in the first presentation, so apologies, but I can read this to you. It's that conversational commerce allows businesses to meet the customer halfway. And that's really important when we think about advertising and marketing communications, because previously we've seen, or you may have heard of what's known as like push marketing or pull marketing. But now actually there's a really nice middle ground in between, where it's actually about meeting that customer in the context that they're the most comfortable with, and also the most willing to be, receptive to you in. So conversational commerce really is that ability to interact more humanly with customers. So this is thanks to the explosion of like social media. I don't know if anyone's seen TikTok, is one of the most downloaded applications in the world globally as of this month, followed by Instagram. So we know that as human beings, we're massively inherently social, and that's where conversational commerce has really come to the forefront because of that consumer behavior. And KLM was one of those airlines as well that basically really understood that shift in user behavior and really kind of delivered that experience to customers back in 2014-15, where they integrated with Facebook Messenger, but also on their website as well, to deliver and conversational commerce as natural language queries as well. So less about being robotic, more about being like a human, assistive experience at all times of the day, not just 9 to 5. And that's a really important one as well, is to give that ability where essentially 60% of all queries were handled through the chatbot. But more importantly as well is when we think about chatbots and the kind of that term, there's different types. Not all chatbots are powered by artificial intelligence, which is another one to bear in mind. And also chatbots that are powered by artificial intelligence can also be powered by humans as well. So what I mean by that is there's also a lot of systems that have what we call human escalation. So when, like I mentioned earlier, AI is built on decision trees and making different responses versus actions. When we think about, someone makes a booking, do they travel in the next 24 hours and need to check in, yes or no? Then, okay, great. Then we can give them their boarding pass or let them choose their seat, yes or no. This element of artificial intelligence, and chatbots, when it gets too complex, instead of kind of giving an error message, which creates massive frustration, we can then pass off to a human in the call center. And again, that connection between humans and the platforms is what makes it a fully, end-to-end experience that customers actually enjoy, as opposed to get incredibly frustrated at. So KLM really understood that balance and how to implement it on a wide scale throughout their organization. One of the more interesting areas within text interpretation as well is sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis is actually an iteration of what was previously maybe more social listening based techniques. But sentiment analysis takes in different areas of text, documents, emails, and can really pull through all of that to understand different areas of emotion. So it means that our customer understanding is no longer binary. Instead of understanding, for example, if you think about Facebook, which had the like or the dislike button, sentiment analysis tells us much more deeper understandings and insights for customers, because humans are not binary. We're not positive, negative, or neutral. We reside on a spectrum of emotions. So if you look at the chart at the top, it's really about the different areas of and AI can process a range of emotions such as joy, fear, sadness, anger, and be able to tell you not just what your customers are thinking about you, but how they're feeling, which is a really key element of being able to deliver the right products to the right customers in their right emotional states. So there's a few ways that is being, that you can implement that, and it's really around campaign effectiveness, so understanding how well your communications are resonating with different customers and whether it's making them feel more connected to you or less through the range of emotions that I just spoke through. And I think one of the key things to also call out here is that sentiment analysis can be as complex or as simple as you make it, really. So it's massively used by not just big organizations, but really small businesses as well, because it gives such a level of insight that is so powerful to anyone in sales or anyone looking to just understand more about their customer base. And that's also true in terms of when we think about customer personas. Traditionally, personas are built on demographics, age, location even maybe, but we're now moving towards far more sophisticated personas as well, where you can group and cluster your customers based on their different emotions as well as their interests and their hobbies to build up much more personalization between each of those segments. And again, because of the way that artificial intelligence works with machine learning, getting stronger over time, so building up more accuracy, it gives that ability to actually not just know where customers presently are, but actually where they might be in future. So in terms of at different life stages, you might get a promotion, you might have a family and grow your family. AI is really equipped, because of this level of sentiment analysis and the technique involved, to forecast where your customer segments could be also, which is a really fascinating part of it. Improving product quality, just quickly, is also when we think about things like customer reviews. That's an area that you can use sentiment analysis on. When somebody says this toothpaste, is not minty enough, that then can be used. And this was an example of when I worked with Colgate. We collected all of their customer reviews across different retailers, and we were able to infer things like toothpaste that was not that was too dry, toothpaste that wasn't minty enough, toothpaste that didn't help for people with sensitive teeth. And that all was used to inform not just how they delivered the marketing and services and experience, but actually how they created their products as well. New product development is an area of businesses where they massively value sentiment analysis, and that can be a really interesting area to develop different ranges and also tweak existing products. And the final one, crisis management. Sentiment analysis is used a lot in elections and also when PR disasters happen. So Facebook used it a lot when Cambridge Analytica happened and every other scandal that's come out of Facebook. So that's a few ways that sentiment analysis can really be implemented. And I really like this quote as well because I think it sums up that whole nature of sentiment analysis, but also artificial intelligence, is that intelligence really only exists within machines once they have emotional intelligence. And Marvin Minsky is often considered one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence as well. And I think this is exactly where the focus of any successful business implementing AI technology and also building on it really need to focus their efforts on. It's not enough just to, get involved in artificial intelligence and to leave it there. It's about considering how the emotional aspect of it is being driven by AI, and that AI is essentially just an enabler, is the key. So the second part of this is image recognition. So this is a field that has also existed for a long time, but it includes the camera part of any device coupled with artificial intelligence to really achieve that image recognition or visual recognition as well. And what it really means is the ability to interpret pictures, places, people, actions in the world around us, and for computers to be able to recognize them and also understand them in more depth and detail. And why this is so important as well is because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, artificial intelligence can help us determine the relevant ones. As humans, our brains are hardwired to process images in as little as 13 milliseconds. So that's an incredibly quick amount of time that we can absorb a visual image and also be able to understand that as well. Interestingly, now the more I work in data and engineering, 30 milliseconds is considered a long time, but for the purpose of this, it's quick. And for us social posts as well, we're moving much more towards visual-led imagery in multiple parts of our daily lives. So even social media started out with Twitter, started out with Facebook, now is actually moved towards like TikTok, massively visual platform, Instagram, very visual, both the top two downloaded apps globally, and that's on a monthly basis as well, because of how we just tend to favor more visual imagery. And the reason for that as well is I'll come on to, but Google is a great example of this. They started out by elevating and transitioning rather from just cataloging images, so a massive database that they were collecting. I don't know if anyone ever played a game that they had where you could compete with some random person in the world to guess the name of the image first. And it was really popular, this game. I actually played it as well. And what it did was actually, it was their way of making everybody their kind of lab rats because they were actually labeling up the images that went into Google. And then that then powers on the right-hand side Google Lens, which has now become integrated into Google Shopping as part of that visual search and discovery process. We no longer need to type in that we're looking for a sofa or that we're looking for a pair of jeans. You can just take a picture of them and say which ones, where can I find them? And that is, again, massively shrinking the path to purchase when we think about the customer journey, because that initial discovery phase is being massively shrunk because we're just able to access information so much quicker than before with visual recognition. Also, it goes right the way through to the purchase stage as well. In Asia, this is one of my favorite videos. People are stealing money from their grandparents just by trying to use their Face ID because selfie pay is that easy to do. This is a great video. If it's ever a rainy day, you should watch it, and I challenge you not to laugh. It's great. So it, oop, hello. So it's becoming that easy to pay for things just because of that ability for a camera and artificial intelligence to work together to create something like a selfie pay. But also a bit closer to home in the maritime and the industry, we're seeing also visual recognition really help with the vessel AIS identification systems. So computer vision is being used to detect different vessels in lower levels. So maybe when it's dark, when it's stormy, those conditions make it really difficult visibility-wise. And machine learning is really coming to the forefront to help detect, the closeness of another vessel, maybe what the quickest route is if you can't fit under a bridge, it will tell you ahead of time. And all of these things are really interesting because it wouldn't have been possible a decade ago. The ability for a computer to recognize another vessel in really challenging environments is incredibly sophisticated and takes a lot of work to achieve. So this is a really, it's Japan that started this first, and it's a novel improvement in the way that vessel detection is made in the maritime industry. And also, in terms of the overall impacts, to summarize, we're seeing that image recognition can really help deliver more hyper-personalized content. The ability to really drill down into at an individual level, almost at a pixel level, and deliver exactly the relevance to each customer based on your products and services is really key. Deeper understanding of customer profiles as well. And then finally, strengthening brand equity as well is really important to strengthen the connection that you have with your customers and overall impact. Expedia is a great example of how they have really taken on deep learning. They have actually used it and created a really powerful model that is able to ingest over 10 million photos. And then they use a technique called classification, which, as it suggests, just classifies all of these images into about 800 groups. So groups of maybe like pictures about hotel properties, pictures about maybe like activities in the area to do. And this process would take a team weeks, months to do because of the sheer number of different databases that they would need to be working across and cataloging images in. But with Expedia, it's done incredibly quickly. And the reason that they do this is, again, what I said earlier, to deliver hyper-personalization. So what maybe, Jim sees on Expedia might be different to what I see. And in fact, it will absolutely be different because of how they understand consumer behaviors in terms of that I might be a business traveler, somebody else might be traveling with their family. So I'm sure everybody here has booked a holiday at some point, especially now that we're able to travel more freely, and you can see that the order of the images and how they're presented is not by accident. It's by systems like this that prioritize the hierarchy of those images. So knowing to show not 16 pictures of a bathroom because you'll switch hotel, not knowing to show maybe business travelers more photos of gyms and pools as opposed to families who might need more pictures of the rooms and bathrooms is all done through this type of algorithm. And that then improves booking significantly for Expedia, and also again increases the efficiency of the teams as well, who don't need to spend time tagging up these images on a manual basis. So this has been an incredibly fundamental piece of Expedia's business operations, but also their ability to personalize what is delivered on their website on a daily basis. Final piece of this is voice recognition. This is one of my favorite fields of AI. Voice recognition has come across massively leaps and bounds over the last, 5-10 years, absolutely. The accuracy, the sophistication of the technology continues to develop as well. But first of all, last piece of terminology for today, I promise, is it's built on natural language processing. And NLP is a really exciting technique where you can really understand and interpret, human human sets of language, not just on a voice level, but even on a text level as well, and be able to pass that data through and allow computers to interpret it and also respond appropriately. That is the essence of natural language processing, that is what we've all come to know and love through smart devices and speakers as well. So more importantly, natural language processing and voice recognition have reached 95% accuracy, which is a really great achievement. However, it's not, it sounds like you could probably stop there and you'd be fine. But actually, more importantly, the difference between 95 and 100%, that 5%, is the difference between us using these types of technologies once a week and us using them every single day. So that 5% is still what everybody is really trying to crack, because in terms of the usage of this technology, it will really elevate it even further. And the reason that voice technology has exploded and really been embraced by consumers and just all of us in general is because that ability for it to be so convenient. So what you can see here is, from a neuroscience standpoint as well, the typing speed on a desktop computer is 40 words a minute. For us, on speech level, it's significantly higher. It takes us about 125, 150 words, per minute, which is much more different. And you can see on the left, Alexa, so a voice speaker, takes far more less brain activity to be engaging with versus texting on the right-hand side, where you can see a lot more red spots because of the level of processing our brains require to make a text and to do that. And it's basically the reason that voice is being addressed so widely by companies is because it eases the cognitive load. That is a weird way of saying our brains just prefer the path of least resistance, but that's the formal way of saying it. So we go for the easier options, and voice is absolutely one of those. And it really helps us in terms of, as businesses, because it improves brand utility, so that ability for us to be as useful as possible for consumers, driving convenience, and especially because of the hands-free nature of the technology as well. It's really good for industries where they need to be out in the field researching, as opposed to just sat where you might have more availability to be typing or texting. Improving customer engagement as well. And the ways that this has been tackled have been really successfully done through a company called Cogito. So Cogito has helped, from a B2B and B2C perspective, improve the customer call center experience. And the way that they've done that, and this is a great example as well of still having humans be coached by artificial intelligence platform, essentially. So what it does is it gives prompts to customer call service agents. A global insurance provider, MetLife, if anyone's heard of it, was noticed that towards the end of call center shifts, they were seeing people maybe rush through their conversations. They were seeing people maybe be a little bit more dismissive because they were just tired and being human. So they implemented Cogito to help give a few more prompts throughout each of the calls around, if someone's speaking too quickly, if somebody needs to take a pause and reflect or maybe ask a question to the customer. This is all prompted by Cogito. And essentially they saw really great results off the back of it, which helped to not just build the relationships they have with customers, but also the amount of time customers spent on the phone with them, having a little bit more of an interaction as opposed to just taking their money, signing them up for a policy and moving on. So this is a really interesting way that we're seeing that gap being bridged through platforms like Cogito as well. And it works in multiple languages. That's the beauty of voice recognition, because it takes in different elements of speech and converts them into numbers. We can work across many different languages. The hardest languages, though, are unsurprisingly Arabic and Japanese. So I wanted to end with a little bit around altruistic AI. So last poll of the day, I know there's one more poll coming up actually, is, so for everyone in the room who may have already researched AI, read about AI, how many of you can name a use case where AI is really just helping to save the world, save the environment? And how many of you can name a use case where you've heard about an autonomous vehicle crashing, a racist chatbot going off saying, an election being rigged through AI? Okay, it's the same in this room, usually. More people have heard of cases where AI has gone rogue and gone wrong, and that's usually because of the sensationalization through media. I work in advertising, I know how the stories are skewed, and that informs our understanding and also our fear for people like even myself when I was getting into the field of not knowing exactly how this technology will impact society for the long run. So what I'd like to do is end with a few use cases of how AI is really helping society as opposed to harming it. We're going to start with seeing AI. So one of the areas where we see artificial intelligence massively benefit society is through what we call assistive technologies, so technologies to help people who have disabilities at a physical and even also a mental level as well. Seeing AI is a really great example of this. It was actually built by a Microsoft engineer who is blind. I've met him, he's based in London as well, is very gifted, and he developed this to help people be able to understand the world around them. So using a combination of visual recognition and speech recognition, you can hold your smartphone up to tins of soup, be able to understand what a currency a note is that you have in your purse maybe, and really narrates the world around you. And this has been a really marvel piece of technology and an incredibly popular app within the App Store, mainly because it also combines different elements in terms of image recognition, optical character recognition, so the ability to maybe tell you how much a receipt is displaying on it, all within one app. Previously, this would need to exist in several different apps that people would have to pay and download, maybe 3 or 4. And the fact this is all bundled into one has been incredibly important and also extends what is humanly possible for people who have disabilities trying to navigate the world that they live in. In Australia, a really interesting one, and this is still one of my use cases, favorite uses of AI to date, is to decrease suicide on train platforms. An increasing problem, and actually that exists in many countries the world over because of the way that it impacts not just the person who is committing suicide, but also the drivers, the bystanders. It's an area that governments and councils have been trying to tackle and still do for much of it. So what happens here is visual recognition is used in partnership with the CCTV cameras and also the staff on train platforms. And instead of having somebody manually look through each film in a control center, which is impossible to keep your eye on every screen and every person, deep learning is used to basically pull out different signals, maybe like the time of day, how many times somebody's going to the edge of the platform and then coming back again, maybe how many times they're pacing up and down a platform. And then it creates basically an alert that then alerts the control center or maybe a staff member on the platform who then have gone up and asked in a very subtle way, just if somebody needs directions or somebody is on the right platform for their train, and has massively reduced the level of suicides that are committed, which is an incredibly powerful way that we're seeing AI used for good. And I wanted to kind of close us out with a little experiment as well. Anyone, I'm sure, has maybe seen this, who's looked at kind of philosophy, ethical problems. Philosophers, engineers, and ethicists are constantly, building new scenarios. But this is one that has been one of the most common, the trolley problem. So the way that we'll do it will be slightly different, but we'll come on to that. So scenario A, there's a car hurtling down the road, pedestrians are crossing, they're crossing on a red light, so they shouldn't be crossing, but they are. Do you hit the pedestrians and save yourself as a driver? Or do you take scenario B, do you hit a barricade, probably you won't make it, but you saved the pedestrians? What scenario would you be picking in this? And this is the decisions that we have to make with technologies like AI. So I'm going to ask you now, anyone for option A? Okay, thanks for your honesty. Wouldn't be on a crossing if you're driving, that's for sure. Who would pick scenario B? Okay, so it's okay, I heard somebody say I don't know, so I'll tell you, I picked scenario A, so we would be friends, but not pedestrians. Scenario B, a few people picked that. Somebody wasn't sure, and a lot of people did not put their hands up. So in every presentation I've ever sat in on AI and ethics, this is used to show intention, action. So what action would you take? I like to use this to show intentionality. And what I mean by that is I'm focused on the people in the room who did not put their hands up, because actually when it comes to the problem of AI and ethics, silence is not an option. And it's not the responsibility of journalists or engineers to shoulder that problem and to have all the solutions. It's people like everyone in this room who maybe aren't in the field, but have an understanding of how we want society to be and how we want to be treated in society, who should have a say. So, you know, people who picked an option, you're actually the good guys here for today. And people who, and when I was first asked, I didn't choose either. And then obviously I've now chosen option A, but it's worth considering that actually, you know, using AI without expertise is okay actually. Using AI without intentionality and without ethical understanding is not okay. So that's just the point I like to make with that exercise. So thanks for joining me on that honesty exercise. Because essentially, the point of that is ladders up to the fact that AI is not a magic wand. With any disruptive technology, we like to think that it can do anything in the world. And actually, AI is only reflective of our morals that sit behind it. Engineers, users, ethics is in the eye of the beholder. So it's really up to us to make sure that we use it the best possible way.
I have a question from you, from the virtual audience.
Oh.
So the question is, have you any data about using sentiment analysis in Google Ads? And this is a Google Ads specialist asking, actually.
Are they? Oh, okay, great. So are we talking about the UK market data in terms of?
Doesn't specify, just say any data.
So I would say Google Ads, it depends. I mean, that's a very broad question, but I appreciate your interactivity from the virtual world. Hello. Basically, it will depend on the type of advertising you're using, because if it's visual based, sentiment analysis won't be as powerful, like it's not possible. So if it's a ad that has text in it, you would need to use an API. But in terms of the data points we're seeing, if that's the question as well, I think it's we're seeing improvements in efficiency of how effectively ads are tailored essentially to customers. But that's a mixture of, I would say, just to the person who asked that question, that's a bit more around predictive and propensity modeling as opposed to sentiment analysis, because sentiment analysis isn't actually embedded within Google Ads specifically. But it's a great question. Thanks for asking.
I have specification, it's text.
Okay, so yeah, if you're asking about text, then yeah, absolutely. It's really powerful, and we've used that on like a couple of clients with different partners as well as Google to achieve sentiment analysis for campaign effectiveness. So just to wrap up, because I'm conscious of time, there's kind of three, I think there might be three or there might be four on here. So there's four. Anyone paying attention, you'll notice that heading is wrong, and anyone that can count. So to start off with, it's really important that we look at delivering high-tech experiences with a human touch. That is the key goal when it comes to artificial intelligence, looking to be solution-oriented and focus on the solution at hand as opposed to the problem is really the point there. Secondly is focusing on learning the rules of engagement when it comes to things like AI and conversational commerce. What might work for one product or one brand or one customer group might not work for another. So it's really important that you don't take a blanket approach to everything, and you actually create a strategy around what that looks like in different environments and contexts. The third one for this will also be looking at making sure that you're really looking at the ethical considerations, minimizing risk to the end user and your business as much as possible. That is where the questions around ethics are really, really important. To quantify, there's 25 definitions for fairness when it comes to computer science, and machine learning addresses maybe only one or two of those at best. So to even start that conversation now is really great work that that anyone can be doing. And the final one, in a world where, these really apply wider outside of artificial intelligence as well. My background is in digital transformation in general, and that is where I like to kind of take the lens that all of these things can be translatable. In a world where commerce, content, and advertising all move at the speed of culture, don't try and be always on, try and be always interesting. We get told a lot that we should be on all the time, 24/7, all that, every hour of the day. And whilst that is important, it's not the end goal, and it's not the most valuable way to create a virtuous relationship between your brand, products, and the customer. It's about being interesting and cutting through all of that noise that we're seeing and ineffectiveness around customer experiences, to be more authentic and more precise with how you're using technology, like artificial intelligence. So those are just a few. If you can tick off one or any of those, you're already doing a fantastic job. But that, for me, is the kind of consistency across different areas of artificial intelligence and transformation that everyone should be focusing towards in some capacity. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask. But thank you so much for spending your time with me this afternoon and this morning. Enjoy the rest of the conference.